Well, good evening, everybody, and a special warm welcome to my guest this evening, all the way from Northumberland, the one and only Mr. Roddy Matthews, the fantastic fiddler. I'm trying to think how long. How long have I known you now? It must be quite a while.
It's quite a long time now, Paul. Just to say hello, nice to see you, Paul.
Oh yeah, very well.
In Galashiels tonight. You must have missed your Bro Lads Festival. It's been sad that so many of the common riding festivals have been cancelled, hasn't it? Because they're great things for getting people together.
Well, yeah. I mean, there was nothing. As you say, the whole event was cancelled. And maybe we'll have something happen next year. I'm sure we will. But
I've loved playing for them over the years. I've played for the one at Jedburgh, the Callans Festival, and also at Langham and one or two other places with yourself and with a number of other musicians over the years. And they're great events because they bring everyone together. It's great for the music. It's great for the dancing. It's great for the tradition. So they're all terribly missed at the moment down here.
Yeah. I was explaining to somebody that today, earlier today, I was explaining to actually a gentleman that resides in Cantonside, a retired car salesman. And I said, I've actually, tonight, I'm very fortunate in that Roddy Matthews is going to join me, And I said, you've heard of the estate agents in Ponteland, Rook, Matthews and Sears, and he said, oh, being an estate agent, I'm sure that's very helpful in being a fiddler. so could you?
That's an old joke, Paul. You're not the first one to tell it.
Yeah. But hi, Peter. Could you give us a little bit of your background as to what got you into music in general and the fiddle in particular?
Yes, well, just to say hello to all the people who are watching. When you do this thing, I don't know who's watching tonight, where you're from, whether you're in Canada or whether you're in Galashiels or you're down here in Northumberland. But it's lovely to see you. And I know that we've all shared our music together and thoroughly enjoyed each other's fellowship doing that over the years. So yes, I will tell you a little bit about my background. I was given a set of Northumbrian pipes from my dad, who was the Duke of Northumberland's piper. Prior to that, a man called Jack Armstrong was the Duke of Northumberland's piper. And he decided, because my dad was a piper, I'd get a set of pipes. I hated the things. And this is a picture of Jack Armstrong. I'll just hold up for your viewers.
Yeah.
Jack Armstrong ran a band.
Keep it there a moment. Keep it there a moment, because I can do this. There you
go. And Jack ran a wonderful band called the Barnstormers Dance Band.
Right.
And when I saw Fergie MacDonald a few years ago, Fergie was saying, that was one of my most favourite bands in the 50s and the 60s. So I grew up with Mum and Dad. Jack was in the house all the time. And I grew up with the music of his band and with his accordionist Roy Hartnell and Jack. And the music was in the house and there were Cayleys in the house. Mum took up the harp and she used to go up to Scotland, the Clarsach. And she eventually became national convener of Common the Clarsach and held very high office in what was the oldest instrument of Scotland. So still is, of course. So we had a huge musical background in the house. When I gave up the Northumbrian pipes, and then Jack Armstrong said, well, we'll give the lad a fiddle, honey, because he called everybody honey. So I got a fiddle when I was about 7 or 8, and I took to it like a duck takes to water. I just loved the thing. And apparently, according to my mother, I'm not old enough. I wasn't around old enough at that time to say it's true. But she said I never really made a bad sound on it. Right. And I took to it and I really loved it. And it was special to me. But I think the inspiration for me really took off when we went on holiday in 1968. They built a new road from Loch Ilot to Glenouig, round to Kinloch Moydart, and the road was built in 1965. We were some of the first tourists along. And it's incredible to think in my lifetime that things have progressed, but there was no electricity. There wasn't even a Lister generator. There was oil lamps.
What?
I remember being a small boy sitting under a table. I might be an about 8-year-old, I think, in this Cayley, and there was a man in a red kilt with a pipe and a moustache, and he was some fantastic fiddle player, and another guy with a full set and a great fiddle player. I'm talking about two of the best West Highland fiddle players, which was Farrakhan McRae and Charlie McFarlane. Fergie was there as well. These two, I think he played the 3-row in those days, and right. the 3-row button he was playing those days, and also in that ceilidh was Ronnie McDonald, Ronnie the Whaler, and his 3 sons, Ian, who's my age, just had his birthday, and Alan and Angus, and there was also Angus Peter McLean and a few other people, and it was an incredible ceilidh, and it just made the hair stand up on my back of my neck. And I knew at the age of 8 the only thing I wanted to do was do what Farrakhan McRae and Charlie McFarlane were doing. And that was the beginning of it for me. And after that, Mum sent me off to my tutor was a man called Herman MacLeod, who was his letters on his brass plaque on his door in Jesmond was LRAMARCM. We don't see them very often now, but he was a leader of the Theatre Royal Orchestra in Newcastle, leader of Northern Sinfonia, and was taught himself by the great Fritz Kreisler. So he was some incredible musician. He was an old man when I went to him, and he was my main tutor through the grades. And he would get annoyed if I didn't practice enough, as you probably do with your pupils, Paul. But we used to go once a quarter to the Lytton Phil in Newcastle, and it was a white tie, tails and white tie. There'd be some Mozart quartet, and then you had to do your grade 5 pieces or whatever in front of an audience. It was nerve-wracking. Yeah. And it was but he was a brilliant teacher, and he used to make me do if there's any fiddle players watching, he used to make me do sight reading Martz's studies, which would be in times like 12, 13 or something, and made you really count. I mean, we just do 6/8 and 4/4 and 3/4 and 9/8 or something, but I mean they were really hard to count, so it was real discipline. I couldn't do it now, I don't think. I really couldn't, but those were the beginning. Those were my early years. And then after that, do you want me to go on a bit more? Or?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I've got loads of questions.
Yes. Well, then after that, when I was about 14, Jack Armstrong had moved to Wallington Hall. Those of you who go to National Trust properties have probably been to Wallington. And Jack moved to the courtyard so he could play in the restaurant there for the tourists who came up there. And every summer, there was a display of Scottish country dancing on the lawn, and the band that was playing that July day, must have been a Saturday, was the David White Band from Whitley Bay. And David had played second accordion for Jimmy Shand and toured with him in Ireland. And in the band was John Wood, Alec McFeet, Tony Hurst, and Ian Thau was the second accordionist. Oh, yeah. They were in for Jack's they always came half time to Jack's for a cup of tea. So I was sitting there very eager at 14. And Jack said to David White, he says, "There's a young lad here, David, who'd like to have a tune with the band." And David says, "Well, why don't you come up for the second half?" So I sat in for the second half, and that was the beginning of my band career. And I then played for the David White Band for many years, and we did all the Leeds Town Hall for West Park School, all the dances that we did down there, Birmingham Town Hall, Edinburgh for a lot of Royal Scottish stuff, and Caledonian societies, which were big back in the 70s. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really big because all my mates were all at school, but I was sitting with a black tie on, smoking myself to death at the age of 14 or 15, because everybody smoked then in the band. And I thought I was really big. And so that sort of introduced me to the bands. And then when David gave up, I played a bit for Ian Thau. And then after I played with Ian Thau, I played a lot for Roy Hartnell as well. And a band called the Borderers, which was a lovely old group of lads who just enjoyed the tune and did lots of village ceilidhs and around the social clubs. We did a lot in County Durham, and we did a lot sort of into the Scottish borders. I had a lovely time with them. Then I played for Robert Whitehead for a while. I really enjoyed playing with him and learnt a lot there. And also went on to play for the Barnacords. And of course, I played with you, Paul, for quite a few years and thoroughly enjoyed the gigs at the Dalhousie Castle and some of the other things that we did and got up to. And but I have to say, one of the absolute sparks in my life was meeting up with young Gary Alexander. He's an absolute stunning musician, and whatever else, he's absolutely always inspired me. He has you had a big part in that as well. You were his teacher for a while, and just has something. You can tell sometimes somebody's got something that nobody else has got, and even during lockdown, actually, we just done a wee thing during lockdown. I'll hold that up. We just did a little. Can't find the camera.
Let me do that. You do that.
You are. and we just made this wee, all done on the iPhone. All I did was play the fiddle, and he did the rest. But I think he was just keen to keep in contact and do a good job. And he's pleased he's doing well just now. But I mean, those are some of the people I really thoroughly enjoyed playing around the islands and doing some of the gigs with him. And then I've done stuff with Ian Anderson's helped me out quite a bit from Langham and a few other people. But I've enjoyed playing with the fiddle as well. I did guest artist spots for the Geary Fiddlers Rally on 2 occasions up in Inverurie. That's a nightmare of a thing. If you ever think it's a nightmare to play in Shetland, which it is, because everybody from the age of 4 to the age of 94 has played the fiddle. Playing at the Geary Fiddlers Rally, where everybody in the whole of Inverurie and the whole, Strathspey Real Society are all sitting in the audience. Well, pleased to manage to pull it off, but that was good. I have had some disasters in my life, but I have a good friend called Tom McConville who always says, Roddy, we've all failed at a gig. And, that's the truth. If we're honest, there's always been one night where it just didn't work for what, the emotions were wrong or whatever. But I've had some great nights. And then in 1999, we went up to the Shetland Isles. I did bring one of these stickers. I'm sure all your watchers have probably seen one of these. That's one from 20 years ago. I think there was one before that, but I managed to find that one in the cupboard, and I was very inspired again. A new stage of my life, because I heard Brian Gear, and Brian was about 15-year-old then, I seem to remember, and I have to say the hairs went. That's one of the few other times after hearing Farrick and McRae that the hairs went on my back of my neck, and I was actually emotionally affected by his incredible playing. Yeah. And we remain good friends. I think we're friends not because of music. I have to say, I make friends. If music's incidental, and it often brings people together, but you stay friends because there's something in your heart of the same. Yeah. And but that was a real massive inspiration to me as well, and thoroughly enjoyed doing that. I've made quite a few LPs over the years, and enjoyed. That was the first. One of the first, there you go, that's how old I am, with the David White Band. That's the first, there you go, that is the first album that I made back in the old days, before we did CDs and before we all went online. Yeah. So, I enjoyed doing some CDs and I think I've done about 8 or 9 now, would you believe? I don't know where the time goes. And you'd always like to do more, but I've really enjoyed doing that. But, going back to what the kids have all got now, they've all got the computers, and they can watch everybody play. And it's a fantastic tool for young people who want to learn music. We didn't have any of this. Yeah. And all we had was the old guys to get alongside. And I must pay tribute, since you've asked me to talk a little bit, to the old guys that I got alongside. I got alongside Jack Armstrong, I got alongside Willie Taylor. Willie Taylor was from Wooler. He wrote some great tunes like We Kerry's Welcome, Farewell to the Dean. But Willie didn't have this finger. He had a fencing accident, so that became his first finger, would you believe? And yet I remember him winning at Newcastleton Festival. Wow. And I remember the judge was James, name's gone, very famous man in the music world. And he said, as he's judging it, he says, competitor number 3, which was Willie, he said, it would have been great if you'd closed the open string with your 4th finger. And Willie held up his hand. Yeah. And the judge just didn't know where to put his face, because there was only 3 fingers on his hand, and he was amazed he put him first. We all laughed in the audience, Yeah. And I used to love Newcastleton Festival. I remember in 1974, there was a great fiddle player. Some of you guys who are watching me right now will remember him very well, Bob Hobkirk. And Bob was a great border fiddle player from Jedburgh. And I remember sitting, it was in the back of the Grapes, and Bob was the man, and the place was full, and Bob was sitting in a chair right in the middle of the long room at the back. And so they said, I was winning a few competitions at that time. Here's young Roddy. So they got another chair for me and put me right opposite Bob. So he was there and I was facing him, and the whole room was full, and we'd have a playoff against each other. Well, of course, he knew a lot more tunes than me, but we got into the old Scott Skinner stuff, Scott Skinner's Compliments to Dr. MacDonald, Forbes Morrison. I can still remember the tunes, Left-Handed Fiddler. Those are all the sort of things we played back in the 70s. And but the music's moved on a lot. I think recently, I've had one of the things I've loved doing has been going to the islands, going out to Barra, and I mean, my mum took all the harps out to Barra in the 70s and knew Janet Somerville and other people out there. If there's anybody up in the islands watching, and she, it's not Lady Somerville. I can't remember her first name, but Mum used to go out there and was an old man who made harps, and she used to go up there, and it was lovely to catch up with some of their friends because Mum's 91 now, still alive, and but she did a great job. She should have got an MBE actually, because she was like an evangelist for the Classic Society. And but anyway, it's lovely going up there, and had some wonderful times at in Barra and Eriskay and Benbecula and recently in Lewis and a number of other places. And I love Skye. I mean, I love going north, and I love going to the islands, and the culture is just absolutely fantastic. What I do is I just bring some tunes, you know, because I was brought up listening to Farrick and McRae and some of the boys up there. I think I can still turn a 2/4 okay, and the people can tell that I've got a little bit of that style, so I'm still welcome. But if I'm doing a concert or something, I tend to bring tunes from our part of the world here in Northumberland and from the borders, and they really like that, you know.
One of my favourites of yours is that Levi Jackson rag, and of course that's American, isn't it?
Yes. We first heard that was with the David White Band. That was we played in an Appalachian band that came to the folk moot, the Tyne Weir folk moot, and they played this tune every night. And we were all very taken to it, so we put it on the end of our set of Americans, which you know, usual stuff, boil them cabbage down and things. And on the end, we put Levi Jackson rag. And strangely enough, Stretch, Ian McFadden, he picked it up and he loved the tune as well. But there's not a lot of people. I haven't heard a lot of other people take it up. It's a super tune. And
is it written by Pat Shaw that also wrote Margaret's Walks?
Yes.
Have I got that right?
Which is an interesting story because he came to stay with Jack Armstrong in Northumberland here. He was very interested in collecting old folk music, so he was very interested in Jack's stuff. And Jack wrote some lovely tunes, but probably the best known of all, which is, of course, Rothbury Hills, which is a beautiful waltz. It's actually a slow air, but people play it as a waltz. And Jimmy Shand recorded that, and of course, then it went viral after that. Yep. So we just had the old boys to listen to and get alongside. And, you know, I look at these kids with all they've got on the computer and these, you know, Sormar State colleges and the Royal College Conservatoire. One thing I am very proud about the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, I was the leader of the school orchestra in Newcastle. And, the boy in the clarinet at the back of the orchestra was a lad called Alistair MacDonald. And Alistair ended up being a fellow. He's still there, one of the longest serving lecturers at the Royal College, Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. He teaches electronic music up there. But it's interesting to think he's now a fellow of the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, and we were both in the school orchestra down in Newcastle together.
Excellent. It's funny you mentioned about the, you know, sometimes, you know, you do have a moment, you try and play a tune and it doesn't quite come out as you wanted to. And I remember once I can't remember whether it was at Perth or it was at Grangemouth one year. And I remember trying to play this tune and it didn't come out right. And all I could say to myself was, Paul, you wish you could have done a bit more practice on that. And that's certainly the case. Luckily, most of the time it went pretty well. But yes,
I think for me, it's a nerves thing. If I'm affected inside and something's not right inside and my spirit's upset, then I just, can't play. Because I believe people, all of us, everybody who's watching, you play what's in your heart. Yeah. And if you're a good musician, you shouldn't need to play in front of dots or anything. It should be what comes out of here. And you can tell when somebody plays from the heart. And I really, I love to get away from being with the dots. And, I love playing with people because, when you play out of the heart, you play, I love playing slow airs, as you know, and those are the tunes that I've probably been more famous I haven't got fame, but you know what I mean? I'm better well known for playing some of the slow stuff. And I love playing the well-known ones, Margaret Ann Robertson and Mrs. Jameson's favourite. And, and I wrote one, as you know, Leaving Lordinshaw, which Brian
very famous.
Made a bit better known. So I love that stuff, but you've got to play out the heart. And if you don't play out the heart, what's the point in doing it? That's the point of music. So,
Well, you know, it's funny because I mean, I had as my sort of mentors both my granddad and my dad. And my granddad was a variety hall, you know, concert accordionist. Him and his brother made up the Capaldi Brothers in the 1930s. Hohner paid them £2 a week just to play a Hohner accordion. But my both of them used to say to me, if you need the music, you don't know the tune. But the best one was my granddad used to sometimes he would point to the music and he would point to the notes and say, you know, Paolo, because that's my real name, Paolo, they're round notes. Stop making them square, make them round.
Yes, make them feeling into them. Yeah, exactly. I must mention while I'm on, Paul, you know, I've had the joy of doing BBC broadcasts with a number of bands, with Gary Alexander first, and then with Robert, and recently I've been privileged to broadcast with Ian Cruikshanks, who's a fantastic style. I mean, you don't realise until you actually sit down with these people what superb style. He's quite, you know, Jimmy Shan sort of style, but he has his own style and a real feeling for some of those lovely tunes. And he particularly looks out some lovely old time stuff, which I know the dancers really appreciate. And the other guy I've been doing broadcasts with is Alan Smith and the Clyde Valley Ceilidh Band, and I've done some touring with Alan, played in Skyway, right in that hall behind you, Paul, in your picture last year for the big dance at the end of the Sky Festival. And it was just a great occasion to be there, you know, being along friends, Ali Kay and that. And I do also play Hogmanay, I do every year with Ian Joseph MacDonald. Ian Ijai is a great friend now, on the phone last night, and we've got a couple of gigs for the Hogmanay lined up and things. So he's a great musician. You meet some lovely people, you know. I mean, I'm so privileged. You go to Banff and you meet lovely people, up to Wick and see Addie Harper and Isabel, and you know, and over to Dumfries and see John Caskey and some of the people over there, and you know, and over to Northern Ireland. We've done a few trips to Northern Ireland and with Billy Boyd and with Robert Finnegan and some lovely people over there. And I've really enjoyed. I love traveling with the guys. You have such a laugh, you know. The thing I've missed most of all about this COVID and this lockdown thing is getting in the car with the lads and having a laugh. And I'm sure a lot of you who are watching this will feel exactly the same. It's great to play a tune, but it's great to get in the car with the lads and have a bit of a laugh up the road. And that's the bit that I've missed most of all.
Yeah. What getting on to this, if you like, I suppose a little bit of history of particularly, you know, the fiddle in the you know, the Scottish music, but also maybe you could touch on a little bit about fiddlers' thoughts on accordionists, because at one time, surely in the history of Scottish music, there weren't such things as accordions.
Well, they were different. There were two-road like melodeons, you know.
But even before then, you know, like from what I gather, a typical Scottish band would be mainly like a string quartet.
Yes, and that's dead right. You know, in the old days of Scott Skinner, they would ford the Dee. If you read the old stories that Paul Anderson will tell you about, they forded the Dee with the bass fiddle. You know, the river was in flood, so they'd stick the spike in the middle, and then they'd vault across the river. And, you know, and some wonderful old stories like that. And yes, there'd be a viola and a couple of fiddles. And so the music's changed. I do like going into the Western Isles. Fergie's just done a thing for his bent notes tune. And there's a team of lads called the Lockdown Ceilidh Band have just won his competition for the bent note tune. And it's a lovely band with a whistle and the flute, which the Western Isles always had. You know, I'm talking about Ian MacDonald at Glenue, a great flute player with Ossian and people, and the whistle player Ian McFarlane and people. This was always part of the music in the West Highlands, whereas I think, you know, the traditional Scottish dance band with two large 5-voice accordions and things is a completely different thing, which I think developed more in the 60s and 70s into the 80s and things. And you've asked me my opinion about. I think there's no point in having a fiddle if you can't hear the fiddle.
Yes.
So in some bands, I think, why is their fiddle sitting there? Because it's so dominated by reed sound, which are lovely. And I love playing with Ian Cruikshanks recently for the reason, and with sensitive players, you know, and young Gary Alexander, another very sensitive player. You'll get somebody who'll let the fiddle sing for 16 bars on its own. And then I often put the fiddle on my knee and I just sit back and listen to the, you know, the Casotto reeds of the accordion for 8 or 16 bars. And then when you bring the fiddle in, there's suddenly a lift and everybody knows the fiddle's come in. And everyone goes, oh yeah, that was lovely because we heard the reeds of the accordion. And I like to hear the reeds of the accordion for what they are. There's beautiful reeds in there as you press the couplers. And I really get, you know, upset when everyone's bashing away all the time. So let the fiddle come out, you know, not just in the slow airs, in the waltzes, but some of the, you know, fast stuff. You know, let the fiddle do 4 bars, even in the reels, 4 bars at the end. You know, Marie and Tom, Marie Fielding, Tom, they're good at this as well, you know. But I've really enjoyed, you know, some of these different things that you can do. And then when you've got a sensitivity in a band, you don't feel you have to bash through. The other thing I would say about playing in a band, I have a couple of fiddles. I'm not going to play because I'm on this because it doesn't work on these things, Paul. I played on Zoom and you get the sounds terrible and you just get lots of top sound and it's not EQ'd properly on these things. But you'd hear the difference how the fiddle's set up. And I use, for the accordion reeds, I have a Ewan Thompson fiddle that was lined up for me by Brian Gear. Very, very privileged to have that. But I use on the bottom 3 strings, I use dominant strings. And you'll understand on a fiddle, because you know something about fiddles, how a fiddle is set up makes a huge difference. I use a Eudoxery or something else for the accordion reeds, because they have a bit of a buzz, and you'll hear solo fiddle players go, oh, I don't like dominant strings, but they're perfect for playing with accordion reeds, and they fit in, and they've got some strength to them. And I did make a mistake once of putting some Eva Perazzi golds on because somebody else said they were good. They were useless. They had no cut. You couldn't hear them through the accordion or anything. And so I've gone back, and strangely enough, my pal Ian Anderson, the fiddle player, he also uses dominance on his fiddle. Then for doing some of the solo stuff, I'm very privileged to have a Matthew Hardy, and I also have a lovely fiddle made by David Mann of Hexham, who makes wonderful violins. I've got several fiddles, but the Matthew Hardy I have set up with obligato strings, which are very soft orchestral, you know, top orchestra strings, and that's got a very soft sound. Mm-hmm. So if you were to put them down a microphone, they're both very, very different.
Sure.
Getting the sound right on the fiddle down a microphone is very, very important if you're recording a Scottish dance band, because they can have a lot of top and be harsh, or you can, if you EQ them too much, they sound as if they're down a tube, and so it's getting the right sort of sound. BBC have got a wonderful man in Aberdeen, and he makes his own microphones. I can't remember the guy's name right now, but he put 2 microphones over me, and I said, well, they're interesting. I've never seen them before. I know I've got a studio, part of studio. I'm involved with a trust at Cokerdale Music Trust. I said, we've got some microphones there for £3,500, and we've got all the usual AKs and whatever you call them. And we've got one thing that's really nice, if you fiddlers are listening, a Roya 121 is a ribbon mic, a really good mic over a fiddle. But this guy had 2 I'd never seen. He'd made them himself, but he's such a brilliant boffin. He had the perfect sound, you know, so it makes a huge difference. And,
I must admit, it's a conversation that I've had quite a few times with my pal Keith Dixon. And that is the fact that, you know, when you're in a band, you've got so many people that are, you don't want them competing at the same bandwidth, if you know what I mean. Yeah. And for me, it's quite humorous, because often the fiddler will do a few bars by themselves, and they'll say, oh no, it's too screechy, and you know, you need to take the treble down, you need more mid and more bass, and that's fine when it's the fiddle by themselves. But when you actually add them in the band, you do need a bit of top, don't you, to allow the fiddle to come through. You don't want it to switch. Yeah. It's the same with the pianist. You know, a lot of bands, you know, they have a pianist that has got a keyboard, a synthesizer, you know, with a lovely grand piano sound. But when you actually hear it in the mix, it's very muffled because it is a grand piano. If you put it onto what we call the bright piano, all of a sudden, ping, you can hear it. It makes such a difference, doesn't it?
It does. And again, it's that sensitivity of playing, and enjoying. I mean, some of these, these fantastic accordions, these Honagolas and some of the others. And there's so much choice nowadays in the accordion sounds as well. Some of the more folky ones are different sound, and again different with the fiddle. And but it's not always easy on stage. You know yourself, you get thrown onto a stage. I have a plug-in mic from the Shetland one through the chin rest, and sometimes if you've got somebody who knows what to do with an amplifier, it's the best thing, because otherwise you've got feedback down the mic, you can't get close enough to the mic or whatever, and because you've got softness of sound, you can pick it up. It does have some difficulties, because the trouble is, if you move your hand and the instrument itself is actually amplified, you've got any of the movement on the instrument. So sometimes you hear the bow on the bridge, and on the strings, you can hear sort of ticking sound as it crosses, because it's picking everything up, or the hand movement on the neck of the fiddle. So, but I still find them very, very useful for doing most gigs, because we can. They're very toppy, so you have to take the top out well and things. But fiddle players, things have come on so far for fiddle players. There's so much choice. I'm very grateful for David Mann in Hexham. I have to say, he's a brilliant fiddle luthier, a fiddle maker, but he's also brilliant at repairing. He rehairs my bows, because I'm quite a rough player sometimes and go through the hairs. And he sets the fiddle up, because that tiny little piece in the middle of the fiddle, a sound post, if that moves by less than half a millimeter, it makes the sound completely different. And it's in a case, and it gets carried around. And so I'm grateful for him for setting my fiddle up nearly every week, and to go in there, and Ewan Henderson will be in, or Tom McConville, or Peter Tickell. I mean, what a brilliant player he is. Played with Pete Bog Fairies and everything, and Catherine and Sting, of course. He's a great pal. I love him. I think he's been a taxi driver recently, because there's no money in gigs, as you know. But there you go. Great to see the young coming on. One last thing I would like to say is, I think it's very important to bring the young on. I've tried very, very hard in many areas to bring young people on, because when you get to a little bit older like me, there's only one way you can go, which is that way. And I sometimes get a little bit frustrated with some older people that it's all about them. And I think, fine, but isn't it time for us, who have really enjoyed it, to make sure that the next generation get as much pleasure? And you teachers like yourself and Keith Dixon and other people are doing that. And I love hearing that, I love the young, I love playing the young Katie stuff. And I know some of the old folks go, oh, that's awful. I think, well, it's great. I've got a very wide taste. I love it. I love it wild and fast and everything. And I love the slow, Jimmy Shan traditional stuff as well. But I think it's great to bring the young on. And I've really enjoyed doing that with the Cokerdale Music Trust, which has been a great thing. I'm one of 4 trustees there, with Neil Strike and with Di Jevons and Richard Johnston. And there's 2 wonderful studios use it, Simpson Street Studios and the Old Church Studios, run by Ian Stevenson and Adam Foster. And they share the studio, and they've done some fantastic stuff in there that's got, top number ones, where they've just done the drum lines only. And then Ian's made some fantastic LPs in there. So that's been a great pleasure. And then recently, your friend in Galashiels, Matt Bramall, and Matt is a wonderful musician. We're in a different class. I'm just a total amateur in comparison to Matt, who has played for some great names like Kylie Minogue and Brian Adams and Andre Bocelli. And you often see him in the telly on the grand piano in front of the orchestra in the Royal Albert Hall, and Catherine Jenkins will be singing or something like that. Wonderful, wonderful young man. I know you know him through the church in Galashiels, and it's been a great joy to help Matt set up his. He already had his studio, he had it at home, but they've just had the second kid, as you know, and there's not much space at home. So I think he's glad to get into the new premises in Galashiels, and I've just really enjoyed it. I've gone up and helped with I'm not much of a painter, but I mean, I'm amazed at Matt. Actually, I'm actually touched to watch a young man who's so advanced in the music world, still happy to put the old overalls on and the paintbrush in his hand. So we wish him all the best, and and I know you work well together, you and him, Paul, and I wish you all the best there in what you're doing. So that's been another really great project. I really enjoyed it. Also, one other thing, I'll just say this: I've thoroughly enjoyed playing my fiddle in the church. We do a lot of chorus in the church. I belong to Hexham Community Church, and we have some wonderful musicians. I mean, Hexham's packed with great musicians, But I've really enjoyed playing some of that, and again, it's stuff I never use the dots for it. I just play from the heart and play, thirds, harmonies, and things. And it's beautiful music, and some of the old hymns and things. And then finally, in more recent years, I've done a thing called Midgie Ha. Midgie, like the little beast Ha, is short for Hall, actually, for Midgie Ha, the Crooked Valley, and Malcolm Barras, who comes from Hexham, who sings a lot of wonderful, all the usual cover songs. Him and I do this thing called Midgie Ha, and sometimes Gary comes and plays, or Ian Anderson comes and plays, or Alan Smith comes along. You'll have to come yourself sometime. And we do some great pub gigs at Barrisford, and everybody's up for a sing song and a dance, and I've really enjoyed doing stuff there. And so here's to lockdown ending sometime, Paul, and let's go back to doing some music. Except, I mean, we've been all doing a bit of music online, but it'd be nice to get on and do some gigs and get out there and meet the people again.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to mention though, or ask you about the obviously we first started doing gigs as a result of Gary saying to us, could you help cover a few gigs? What have been the ones that have sort of stuck out in your memory? There's one in particular in my memory, all the way up to Hootenannies, and that was.
Oh yeah, you're talking about me. Yeah, I do remember playing in Hootenannies with you, Paul, and I remember a guy coming up from Fort William Way. We were in Inverness playing on the platform that night, and he came up. I think you were playing Father John or something like that. And, he comes up. He's doing a Canadian band dance, and he says, he shouts up to the stage. He says, "Well, that's great music, boys. You boys must be straight out of the islands." And you bent down from the stage, and you said, "You what, mate?"
Yeah.
I'm from Cheltenham.
Well, yeah, a little bit devilment in me there, but then also, we've had the fun things with those sort of gigs, but also because of you, I had the misfortune to meet James Trigger Tate. What can you tell me about James? How did you first meet with James, and what have we sort of collaborated on together with him?
Well, to be honest, I mean, I met James when Gary was living in Rockbury. I knew the family, but I knew about his daddy and Tate and Barraburn through the Barraburn Reel, which is up the Cokerdale, and I knew Addy Harper. Young Addy and I used to do competitions at Newcastleton actually, when I was about 14, and I could never win. He was about 11. He's a few years younger than me. He's bolder than me, I'm pleased to say. But, he was brilliant because his dad, and he knew everything. And Mum played the piano for him, and it was practiced. And Addy would win, and I'd be second. But I got dropped off in a lot of competitions, on my own. And Mum and Dad wouldn't come, and I'd be sitting there on my own. And Isabel Harper was wonderful to me. She'd say to me as a little boy, and almost in short trousers, Addy would be on one side, and she'd say, well, Roddy, just come and sit next to me, son. You'll be fine here. Yeah. And would sit in there. But I mean, I don't know where the train of thought's gone, Paul.
Well, it was just that it was while we were doing a fair few gigs.
You're talking about James Tate, weren't you?
Yeah. And you said to me, would you be interested in, or could you help this guy down in Rothbury? He's he's a bit deluded, he's a bit wacko,
I'll tell you one thing: he's like yourself. He's a natural musician. I mean, he's a very good musician, and I sometimes think he's not really appreciated because he's quite a shy guy.
He's very shy, yeah.
and he's slightly nervous.
Yeah.
And James, if you're listening, I'm saying all this because I love you. But
Yeah.
I really think that he isn't, he's got so much to give. He does some wonderful work around the schools and stuff. And he writes his own tunes and his own songs and things. And I know he's had a lot out of, playing with you, Paul, because it's just, you're pretty steady on a stage, and it just has helped him. I do remember one night we went to play with the Irish with James Tate. I think Jock Lethan was playing the drums and Gary, and James got on the stage. He'll never forget the night. And he went along the stage and pulled with his left foot as he dragged it along the stage, pulled every single lead out of the amplifier. I have to say, I have done the same trick once myself.
Yeah, same here.
So you do a lot of work on a stage. You tend to lift your feet. It's something you learn. You tend to lift your feet because you learn there's always leads underneath, and you sort of lift them up very carefully before you move off the stage.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
Yeah. No, it was very interesting because, as you said, we started doing that that CD for James that we recorded down at your studio at Thropton, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's gone really well. Since then, we've actually done a CD together.
Yes, you and James have. Yes,
yeah. James and I did one, and I know he churns them out on a regular basis. I think even during lockdown, he was doing a tune for lockdown, and now he's done an album, and he does a lot of poetry as well, doesn't he? But
I've really enjoyed. Can I just say, for everybody who's watching, I've really enjoyed some of the stuff on Facebook, some of the shows. Gary Alexander's done a superb show. It's on, I think he's cutting it down to twice a week or something, but really enjoyed that. Really enjoyed Graham Mackay's show as well.
Yeah.
Some super stuff there off Graham Mackay. Yeah. Alan and Gemma have been doing a super show as well.
Yeah.
And of the fiddle stuff from the shed, Pete Clark up in Dunkeld. Pete Clark has done some superb stuff, and played all the Neil Gow stuff and things, and really enjoyed that. And while we're on about that, I was going to be playing at the Neil Gow Festival. I played at a few in the past. There's one for the old programs from years gone by. But I was playing at that. Sorry, I was going to be playing at that this year, which would have been in 2020. But of course, like everything else, it's cancelled. But some years ago, about 12 years ago, I had the great joy of getting the memorial up to James Hill. There you are, Paul. That's
oh yes, yeah. Let me do that on again.
About nearly 15 years ago now, and that's me playing next to the statue when it went up. And it was a great joy because I love playing James Hill tunes. Play all the James Hill tunes when I go up to Inverness or Banff because it came from Tyneside, and it was a melting pot in the Industrial Revolution of Scots and Irish, and so we have our own what we call the Newcastle style of hornpipe playing, which is basically bowing every note out in the triplets. Although if there is such a style, it's often debatable. We wrote some fantastic tunes, but with Pete Clark, I had the joy of helping Pete getting this new statue up to Neil Gow, which is going to. It hasn't. I don't think it's quite gone up yet, but they've got the planning permission now, I think, and everything. And so I started off the fund for that with Pete, and he's been running the festival specifically to do this. It's his baby, and really proud of Pete that there's going to be a lovely statue. I've seen the statue, bronze statue of Neil Gow playing his fiddle in Dunkeld. So when the tourists go, there's something there for them to understand about our music, rather than it just being something glib that they've maybe heard of. They can actually go and visit the statue and learn a bit about Neil Gow. So well done to Pete, and well done to the other people down in Newcastle. Good friends like Tom McConville and Stuart Hardy, who keep the James Hill stuff going so well. Here as well.
No, I was going to say, when it comes to listening to people play, doing their sort of little concerts on Facebook, I've heard Gary, Gemma, and Alan. Peter Wood himself and tunes and this.
Yeah, should have mentioned that.
And you in Galloway as well. I've seen he's
have you done any tunes in the house, Paul? Have you done any tunes?
I haven't. No, I've because I've got quite a few of my stuff already on YouTube.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I've already done quite a few what I call music videos, which I've already put on YouTube. So I mean, I'm sort of quite happy with that. And to be honest, I at times I feel like I don't rely just on gigging.
No, yeah,
That's my so I wouldn't want to start sort of trying to sort of dare I say it, sort of clutter the marketplace, as it were.
Yeah, exactly.
There are some people who who rely on it for their livelihood. So I feel like it's it's good to let them. But I mean, no, interesting. You were saying about
sorry, just to interrupt, but I just let's compliment those guys who've done tunes in the Who's, Martin McLeod, Wood, and the other people. And a lot of people have had a great deal of pleasure out of that.
Yes.
Great deal. So well done to them. I don't know what you've got to do to get a medal these days, but you probably deserve one because they've kept a lot of people happy.
Absolutely. But no, it was interesting, that Dunkeld Burnham thing. I remember going up and doing a thing with you a few years back. That was very interesting because Burnham is actually the Burnham Woods that's mentioned in Macbeth, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that same bit. Yeah. And I wanted to kind of finish up by asking you a little bit about your when did you sort of get into composing? Because you sort of very briefly mentioned Leaving Lord and Shore, but of course it's one of those tunes that I mean I have people ask me where can you get the music to that, and it's like, well, I've got it, it's here, but you've written some great tunes. When did you first start getting into the sort of writing of the tunes?
Well, there is an interesting story because I told you early on about Loch Island and my childhood at Rochford with Alan and Mary-Ann Blackburn and all the wonderful Moydart musicians that totally inspired me. Thank you to all the guys in Moydart and Loch Arbor. If you're listening tonight, I just thank you for all you gave to me when I was younger. I really appreciate it. And I still love going to listen to you guys. But getting back to the tune, the first tune I ever wrote was Nigel Blackburn's Farewell to Alan's Tractor. And it was this tractor, I had to do the silage at Rochford Farm on this old grey Fergie. I'm talking about the tractor, not the man, okay? And I had to sit on this tractor until the clutch burnt out. So it stuttered and stuttered and stuttered. So I wrote this very automatic tune, which like that, and the tractor starting the engine, so it was an onomatopoeic tune, and we had a lot of laughs about Nigel Blackburn's Tractor. So that was the first tune that I wrote, and that must have been quite young then. And strangely enough, a friend called Rob Fairley of Alistair produced the music, the original copy, about last year of this Farewell to Nigel Blackburn's Tractor. I think I had seen off. Anyway, that was the first, and then I suppose you get inspired and you write a bit of rubbish, and I must have written a lot of rubbish. But occasionally, I think you write something. You occasionally, very, very occasionally, there's thousands of tunes, and there's loads of people bringing tunes out right now. But very occasionally, something is in your heart. Again, going back to what's in your heart, that comes out and really means something. Whether it's a reel that you write, or a jig, or a march. And for me, it's often slow airs. Leaving Lord and Shore is probably the best known. But I also wrote a tune for Kevin Henderson, who plays with the Boys of the Loch in the Section 89, called When His Dad Died. And when Davy Henderson died, I wrote him a tune called The Eternal Tears of Love. And because he was just devastated when his dad died. So that's been played a bit as well. And those are probably two of my favorite tunes. Another tune came out of an experience called Da Kirk Stack. And Ewan Thompson, who made my fiddle, I went out to have it 6 months later to have it set up again out at Fair Isle, where he was living then, he would take me out to the Kirk Stack, which looks like a church. There's 2 stacks out there.
Yeah.
He took me through an arch there, and I was deeply moved by the scenery. I mean, the birds, the wildlife, the bouncies, and everything. There's the skewers coming down and the puffins into the water, and a really deep blue water and a deep swell. And so I wrote this tune called the Kirk Stack. Now, if you write tunes, they're no good unless somebody else plays them. And that one was recorded by the Fiddler's Bid on their album Naked and Bare. And when the Fiddler's Bid played that tune, all the kids wanted to play it. So it was lovely. I'd go to Shetland and there'd be about 20 kids all playing this tune, the Kirk Stack. And I went back a few years ago, and there was a few of them playing then. And of course, I'm not really well known amongst the fiddle players. The older guys know me, but I'm not really as well known. And they were knocking this tune out. And I said, "Oh, that's great tune, that." You know who wrote that? I said, "Well, yeah, actually, I did." And it was a nice little moment, because they said, "No, you didn't do that, did you?" The Fiddler's Bid wrote that. So, but I thank Chris Stout for that, because Chris was a good mate, and Kevin and the boys in the Fiddler's Bid. I mean, they was tremendous. I mean, they came down in 2003, a while back now, and all stayed the night. And the party was utterly amazing. I mean, they never went to bed, and they were due for They did a live broadcast from the Queen's Hall in Edinburgh the next day. They left here. They were supposed to be in for a sound check at 11 a.m. They didn't leave here till 3 p.m. Katrina Mackay drove the van up, and they all threw themselves on the stage and did a brilliant broadcast. And they spent the whole night playing down here in Bingfield House, where I live. Hey ho, great days, good memories.
You've reminded me of something that happened, that's something similar to me, and that was when we went to Hootenannies the second time. I think we did Hootenannies on the Thursday, and on the Friday we went to Dingwall to the
Mallard.
Yeah, and we stayed with Hamish and Margot McClellan, and you got your fiddle out and you started playing this tune. And it sounded really good, but it sounded familiar. And I said to you, "Roddy, what's the name of that tune?" And you said, "Well, you should know this one." I said, "Yeah, I know I should, but what is it?" You said, "Well, it's the one that you wrote for Keith Dixon." Isn't it amazing? But it was just hearing in a different context. It was great to hear it in that, to hear you playing it. And I think because it sounded familiar. Of course it did, because I've but so many times hearing it on the accordion, but to actually hear it on the fiddle was absolutely great.
I think as you get older, Paul, all the tunes that you learned when you're young, when you're actually stuck on a stage, those are the ones that you pull out, because I think as you get older, it gets harder to remember stuff. But the ones that you all learned when you're in your 20s and 30s, you can rely on those,
Yeah.
I still remember the first set I heard Farrakhan McRae play, which was, I remember him playing, the reel was The Ale Is Dear. He played Millbank Cottage, followed by G.F. Mackenzie, Garen the Hiding Stornoway, and The Ale Is Dear. And I still love that set of 3 tunes, March Strasbourg and Reel, because he played them.
Yeah.
Amazing, absolutely amazing.
Yep. Well, listen, Roddy, that's nearly an hour. Well, bearing in mind that we were chatting beforehand backstage, that is well over an hour that I've kept you. So I'm going to let you crack on, because that's been absolutely brilliant catching up with you. Well, and also, having the hearing a little bit more about the fiddle world. Look, I've got my sister's old fiddle, and as I think I do occasionally try and knock out a tune on it. I'm working on some a few of those Shetland reels just now. They're very rough, but it's something that I've come to appreciate as I've gotten older. At one time I was never interested in I did the cello when I was very young. That didn't interest me. It was all accordion for me. But starting to appreciate the not just the sound of the fiddle, some of the techniques that you've got, some of the
Let me go back to the words of my first my great music teacher, Herman MacLeod,
Yes.
LRIMARCM,
Yeah.
advertisement leader of the Theatre Royal Orchestra, pupil of Fritz Kreisler. He used to say, you know, what is the worst instrument in the world? It is the fiddle, the violin in the wrong hands. But what is the best instrument in the world? It is the violin in the right hands. I don't know that I qualify for the second, but it is true. And when you hear it, because it's the only thing that's next to the human voice, because you can vibrato on the strings, you can make it sound, and if you've got it in the hands of a good player, it can genuinely break hearts for the right reasons.
Excellent. Okay. Well, as I say, thanks, Roddy, for joining me. If at some point in the future, I would like to come back and do a chat with some more fiddlers, and I'm just wondering if you would care to join us again for that.
Yeah, very happy to.
You know, but what you know, as I've said to everybody that's come on so far, you know, the using this StreamYard, we can have up to 10 people in the chat. You know, maybe that might get a bit too much, but if I could ask you to join us again at some point, you know, that would be great.
Lovely, thank you, Paul.
Just
Nice
give us
to you.
a few more of you.
Yeah, just to say, if anyone's still listening, thank you ever so much to listen to my little bit of my life story. I really appreciate all you guys. You're great guys. Keep playing the music. Thank you for all the inspiration that you've given me and the fun that we've had together over the years. Thank you very much, guys. All the best to you all, and Gills as well, of course.
Well, do you know what? Since we first started, the number of people watching has quadrupled.
Amazing.
Yes, but don't worry about that. It's because we're on YouTube. Obviously, people will catch up later on. So you know, they're always there's always certain people that join us, which is great for the live chat, and then there are others that prefer to you know to get it at their own leisure, you know, later on. And as I said, well, yeah, for me it was just a case of, you know, we don't always get to hear some of the background of the various people that involved in the music world, you know. I mean,
I was listening to the Keith Dixon interview about the Russian accordionist. It was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm like you. I take great pleasure in the fact that, you know, when you were you know, when you were still working as the estate agent, you know, but then of a weekend, it's like you couldn't get further away than going up into the islands and highlands and doing your fiddle stuff, you know, and you can't help thinking, you know, that there'll be some people, you know, that have got their regular 9-to-5 job, another weekend they'll just sit and vegetate in front of the TV, and then they'll start it all over again. But you know, somebody like you that's keen to get out there, and you know,
I'll tell your viewers a little secret to finish off with.
Go on then.
There was times when I was doing gigs up near Fort William and up in the Highlands on a weekday.
Yeah.
And we'd get back in the car at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
And I would put a suit on and not go to bed. And go to the board meeting, and I'd be sitting there with a suit on in the board meeting, and if they'd ever known I'd been somewhere like Kinloch Burvey the night before, and I was still sitting there. Yes, we'll make some multi-million decisions just now. And I'll tell you what, it kept me sane. It actually kept me sane. At a very hard time in business, and we had some hard times, 1990 and 2007, 2008, in the big recession. We closed offices and lost staff. It was a very hard time in business, and playing music at that time kept me completely sane. And I thank God for the musicians who played with me then and kept me sane. And if it wasn't for music, I think I would have cracked up. I mean, it was a very hard time, you know, when we had to redesign a company. Yeah. So I'm glad that's all a part of my past, and I hope I get some tunes in the future, Paul. Thank you for all your kindness.
Well, Roddy, once again, thank you very much, and thank you everybody for joining us. Catch me again next week. I think next week I've got Mr. Paul Chamberlain lined up to join me for a chat. So that should be interesting.
Yeah.
Because I'm
Thank
sure
you.
Paul has got some interesting stories to tell us about trips to Russia.
Well, thank you, Paul. Thank
You're
you,
very
everyone.
welcome. Thank you. I'm going to click this button here. I'll click that one there.